wonderful panel ready to share their insights and perspectives. May I invite Vidisha Nagaraj to take the seat. She is the Vice President Marketing of Schneider Electric. Before that, as you all know, she was in Cafe Coffee Day as Director Marketing. Anand Subramaniam, Senior Director, Ola PR and Marketing Communications. Please join the dais, please. Ira Pradhan from Mercedes-Benz, R&D. She was earlier with Philips, Tesco and Wipro. And finally, Minol Ajekar. She's the Head of Corporate Communications for Puravankara Limited. So thank you very much for agreeing to participate in this panel. And all of you are people with rich insights. There's a common saying that what is giving CEOs sleepless nights? I think the CCO is not far away from the derived sleeplessness of the CEO. And if you were to extend that analogy, what is giving CCOs sleepless nights these days? And even though you're heading marketing, Vidisha, the comms function reports into you. Maybe I'd like a 1 or 2 minute perspective from each one of you on what is giving you sleepless nights in the very disrupted world that we live in.
You know, I think before talking about my sleeping patterns and habits and all that, I think it's important that something that I'm personally experiencing heading marketing and actually pretty much all through my career, as far as I can remember, although I've been a marketeer, I've always had one hand in communications. So I think the first thing is that when people say that this is the communications function, and this is the brand function, and this is the marketing function, I find it a bit hard to sort of, put a strong barrier around all of them, because I think at the end of the day, all of us are trying to pace the customer journey. And in the process of the customer journey, communication, of course, plays the most important role. I mean, without quality communication, whether it's a product out there in the market or an investor trying to buy shares from your company, or an acquisition, or anything. So I think communication is at the center of it. Although I am a marketing person, I like to actually be also called a communication person, because I think both cannot be altered.
There's no dividing wall.
There is no dividing wall. And if you look at how communication in the last 10 years has evolved, I mean, some of you all maybe are all in the millennial category, but I've certainly grown up. I started my career in Lintas in advertising, and our briefs used to be written by hand, and there used to be a box folder where we used to file it. Those days are very different. And if you see the way communication has evolved, there is internet that's come in, there is social media that's come in, there is technology that's come in, there is, gone are the days where there is a source and communication comes out of the source. Today there's peer-to-peer, right? There is very little of, we're looking at this, this newspaper to read content, and that's how the communication is getting disseminated. All that is gone. It's all kind of craziness is happening. So I think what I worry about sometimes, Schneider Electric is a French multinational. We are in the energy management business. I think somebody was speaking about CSR and social values. Privileged to be in a company where our mission is a social mission. So, but I think coming back to your question, I'm constantly struggling with two things. One is trying to align the entire company with a singular communication/brand language. I think, there's a big struggle there. Even though there is a brand language, guidelines, etc., I think somewhere it gets completely dissipated down. And so I think that's a big struggle, because at the end of the day, whether it's a customer, whether it's a journalist, whether it's whoever, is looking at your company as one company. And if if disparate people are talking in different languages, communication languages, then it just defeats the purpose. I think that's one. And the second thing is, I think, which all of us must be worried about, is I'm constantly, I'm worried about being constantly trying to chase my reputation, I want to be proactive in sort of being ahead of it. And that's, I think, that's what keeps me.
Are you mostly successful in that?
I think so. And again, going back to the business that we are in, a lot of it is just by the mission that we have. Schneider Electric, I don't know if all of you all know, our basic mission is, is to provide electricity and energy to everybody. Today, in India, 350 million people are below the grid. They don't even have a single bulb in their house. So our big mission is that how do we save energy in the urban areas, and how do we give, electrify all of India. So I think some of it gets into the social, our basic mission that we are in. So people don't look at us as this capitalist, company which is trying to. So I think a lot of it goes there, but I think we are fairly successful. We use technology and digitization very, very successfully to be ahead of the curve. So,
Anand, you deal with 1 million rides every day or more,
2.5.
Each is a potential risk variable.
Sure.
What gives you sleepless nights?
Sure, I would say the two dimensions to it, and not looking at this as a typical consultant would, but I would say this is a matrix form, right? So on one hand, the nature of media is changing so rapidly. Everything from a 1-star feedback on our own app to our own device and own media platform like an Ola Play, to say a LinkedIn post or a chatter on social or perspective and gossip can actually trigger a lot of reputation risk on one hand. On the other, I would say the nature of business is changing by the day, right? While that is a reality that we live with, what it also puts us to is a very wide array of interesting paradigms. So today, for example, we launched a credit card, right? Within a single hour, we get included in a media universe, in a conversation universe that never existed until yesterday. So the nature of these two working with each other makes it so much more complicated, interesting and challenging, but complicated definitely, right? So that's really where the opportunity is, and the risk also is. This would mean we invest so much more in listening tools, and these listening tools are not just external, but many more listening tools internally, right? This would mean comms doesn't become a function that is about listening and speaking, but it's about understanding and actioning. Something as simple
real
as
time.
absolutely something as simple as saying, can we get a radical feature like what we call Ola Guardian today, which is essentially a call that goes out to a customer, a female customer after 10 p.m. If she boards a car and there is a diversion in the direction, actually comes as a product feature as a result of a potential incident that may not have even seen the light of the day, right? That's the kind of empowerment that the function has, but at the same time, those are the kind of opportunities that these risks really enable.
By the nature of your company, one would say you may not be having sleepless nights managing a comms function, or do you?
So I really believe that corporate communication is industry agnostic. We have so many people from so many different industries, and we have, as you can see, similar challenges. So sleepless nights, yes, I do have. Having said that, of course, I would say that sleepless nights are caused mostly by noise for me, in terms of all the media landscape that is changing for one, and you must be, and Anand, you must be knowing that the automotive industry is changing so rapidly like never before. It's just been over 5-6 years, let's just say that, where we didn't expect competition to come from, we didn't expect a mobile phone to start saying, I want to build, I want to make a car. So we suddenly got into this whole new mode of culture change as well as strategic change. And we have this new strategy in Daimler called CASE, which is connected. We're not talking about a mechanical vehicle anymore, but we're talking about connected, autonomous, shared services as well as electric. So the noise that the whole industry is making, the automotive, as well as the noise the media landscape change is making, that's what keeps me, sleepless nights, I think.
Minal, the construction business has been in the eye of storm, and so much regulation, so much criticism, so much gray areas around the whole business. How do you deal with them, and what gives you sleepless nights?
Thanks, Madan. I look around the room here and I acknowledge that I'm probably a toddler in the world of communications, though I, unofficially did branding for a while. The tag of communications just came to me like 4 years ago. So I'm going to talk about my personal challenges and, learn as I speak. Because real estate is what it is, reputation is not just a marketing tool for us. It is a boardroom agenda. This is what the sector, not just the company, talks about day and night. To use a colloquial, roti, kapda or makan, while roti and kapda got its due, makan is still lagging behind in terms of the kind of industry reputation it should have had. And I think currently, more than anything, it's the speed at which content is being consumed by everybody that you have consumers, you have stakeholders who are so aware, and so then you are not just managing your reputation, you're constantly changing the context of managing reputation, because you are dealing with a very highly engaged individual, because he knows so much or she knows so much. So I think that is one thing that, especially for this sector, really holds true. Other couple of things, and maybe these are personal things, is something that Elliot mentioned earlier today, was corporate territory. In terms of this whole marketing and communication, it's not a wall, but it's still a wall in some ways. So how do you cross that? That's a tiny thing. And as communications is evolving so rapidly, I think it's also how to take my internal stakeholders on this journey with me. So while I am learning rapidly, how do I ensure that they are also evolving to get into this world of communications as I am?
Most of you spoke about external challenges and how you deal with them. Are there internal challenges you feel you face? I often hear the public relations professional, both sides, complaining that, well, I don't have a seat at the table, CCO table, CXO table. I don't get the budgets, I don't get the importance, I don't have a seat on the boardroom. And this conversation is a global conversation, not only in India. Do you have that communication gap within your boardroom and you, or you think most of you have bridged that gap, and if the gap is there, how are you coping up with it?
Something somebody told me long back, which has stuck with me always, and to this point of yours, that why doesn't a communication expert get a seat in the in the boardroom or in the next to the CEO? And I did ask this question of somebody saying, why do I not get a seat? And they asked me 3 questions around my competition market share, and I had no clue. And they said, you've got your answer. Just because you are a communication specialist does not mean that you stay aloof from the market, right? You gain respect in the company, and people believe that you are communicating as a business person. You're not communicating as a person who's storytelling, right? It's not always, it's about the narrative, but if you don't know enough about your company's revenue or your company's bottom line or the competition market share or your market share, communication is as strategic a function as any other function in the company. And I feel that sometimes we fall short of that, And the day we say, no, I'm a communication expert, but you know what? I can talk strategy and I can sell my company strategically on the stage as much as anybody else. that seat will be reserved for you.
Anand, you might have this problem at a lesser extent because it's a young company and
Sure.
you're almost born with the company.
Sure. So,
What prescription you would have for others maybe?
so I was about to say that. I mean, at some level, I think as an entrepreneurial organization, we've been lucky enough to be able to build talent exactly the same way, right? And but 5 years ago, I was part of the launch team and we actually went out and expanded beyond our 2 cities, right? And we built a playbook on how to launch a city, which was technically what an ops guy would do, right? Even to date, in fact, every person who comes on board the team actually goes through a full rigor that mirrors business practices. So a person who's joining the team, for example, actually hears through 2.5 hours of customer calls, 2.5 hours of partner calls, is part of field training, is part of onboarding, is part of a variety of actual business processes so that they're able to internalize it much better. And I think that entrepreneurial view really helps you grow as a business partner, right? We have further gone ahead and institutionalized it, given the way we are looking at our business today, which is I would say a collection of 7 companies with all of them with mobility as the core. We are looking at it from a point of view of saying how do we build business partners, communications business partners for each of these functions, right? So like you would have an HR BP for every single business vertical, we are building a team of comms BPs who would actually be part of business from step 0. And that we think is a very sustainable way to solve for it. Years to the ground on business is way more important than storytelling, I would say, because that really forms the quality of
So
the
the point
content
Dinesh
that we
also
get.
made.
Absolutely.
Ira,
think-
do you face this as a challenge within a multinational company like Daimler?
Yes. I was going to say that I agree with Bidisha, especially on the seat at the table bit. I realize I did say it in this forum itself just a little bit earlier that we are communication principally as well as process-wise we are agnostic, industry agnostic. But at the same time, it's so important to understand the business. And in my case, it is automotive, right? The first time when I joined Mercedes-Benz about 4.5 years back, I was working in Philips before that, so I knew a lot about healthcare, but it was a lot easier for me because when I talk about R&D automotive, it's not just about how the car looks, how the S-Class looks or the our A-Class looks, but it was more about my journalist was suddenly interested in knowing, so what does a wiring harness looks like? And I was like, yeah, what does it look like, you know? So I had to go, and then I went inside a room, and the room was about this big, and the wiring harness was all over the place. I didn't know that big part would go inside a car, you know. So it was very important, I realized, for me to understand every part of the business because auto tech has certainly become a very interesting topic to technology people. So there really, some of the journalists tell me that, okay, so we have these mobile launches, we have these car launches, but can we now look at also auto tech? So I do have, yeah.
Construction, property development is still a evolving business, so to say, in let's say the professionalization of the management structures of the organization. Many of them are very entrepreneurial, many of them are first generation or the second generation has just taken over. And most of them are very opinionated, strong-headed people. How do you deal with in making your voice understood and felt at? Is that a challenge?
Small answer, no. But I hear what you're saying. Most of real estate in India and also worldwide is actually promoter driven. So that's, I mean, while everyone aspires and says corporate status, and you have all the big corporate houses coming into real estate now. Fortunately for me, one of the other hats that I wear is in operations. So I already reported into the CEO. So I think I got the shortcut method when the comms came to me. But if indulge me in giving you an example, the only thing I tell my team all the time is you have to add value, not just to the PR function, the comms function. You have to add value to the organization because that's what communication is about. So how do you track it? It's difficult. So we did a sort of a experiment, but not really, one of the home exhibitions. You know, it's a common thing. You go, you meet people, people come in, you sell a home. The business wanted to use a robot for the visitor management system, and they're very good-looking 2 androids that came, very smart, Bangalore-based startup. So we said, let's have a press conference before you guys actually go into your exhibition. And press came, the androids were really good looking, everyone was interested, a lot of selfies were taken. And this was on a Wednesday or Thursday, and Friday on one of the newspapers, there was a front page ad saying, Purvankara is having an exhibition, come and meet the androids. There was a number at the bottom. And on the 18th or 19th page was a features listing that came out from the press conference to say, this happened, and there were humanoids, and it was really good. It was a small article. And the number under that article was from the PR team, one of my team members. And he had to give up his phone for 10 days because people called that number and not the number that was advertised in the front page. So I think, I keep using this example over and over again, but if you add value, I think you will get a seat. I tell my team, I tell myself, and is what I've understood.
A large number of Indian organizations not connected to a new generation of customers coming into the marketplace. Millennials, you call it, or you call it the Gen Z. And while they're very strong in the traditional marketing approaches or communication approaches, are they really waking up to how do you deal with this new person or a new individual who has a completely different mindset, completely different aspirations, completely different attitudes to life itself? Is this a part of your challenge, and how are you coping up with that? Though the industry context is very different, but the millennial is a common challenge, whether he comes as an employee or a customer or as a neighbor or a shareholder tomorrow. Finally, he's a millennial, and 5-10 years later, you will have to deal with him. So anybody can take up this question.
I was just talking about millennials, and I realized that social listening, that's the new skill that we really need to learn. I can give an example of somebody who's really capitalized. We never thought we'll speak about them, but Kylie Jenner, I think she's the youngest billionaire, and I think she really used that social listening skills that she has on her Instagram followers to create the business that she has. So I think social listening is very important to understand the millennial, the generation that we are all having issues and challenges understanding.
Is it limited only to listening? Because you need a product that is different. You need a service attitude that is different. You need to create a workplace environment that is different. You need to create an intergenerational kind of alignment within the same organization. And generations are changing every 5 years in that sense.
2 parts to it, right? I think one, getting a pulse of what the average millennial wants to hear, where he or she is and what they want to hear. But I think what really matters to the millennial today is intent meeting action, right? While back in 2015, there were fun memes floating around, and we keep talking about this at every single opportunity that we can. There were fun memes floating around on Ola pulling out boats in Chennai because there were actually no cars, and that was a genuine concern, right? What translated that into some amount of goodwill that we still taste is in the ability to action it, right? So at some level, I think what the generation really cares about is in moving the intent all the way until action, right? I'll come to a more recent example, which was we have this annual tradition of building a very interesting April Fool's prank every year, right? And this year we did something called Ola Restrooms, which is essentially mobile washrooms that come to you just like you would get a cab, right? While the thought was predictable and everyone knew that this would be a prank, because at some point people begin to see a pattern and may not be able to appreciate it. What got us more interest and intent in terms of coverage this year, or attention this year, was the fact that we took it a little further and we said, while this is not reality, what we can probably help has actually helped an NGO build toilets across the country, and you still can donate 1 rupee on every ride until probably October 2nd, where we would probably celebrate Swachh Bharat Abhiyan with all the funds raised. So there is some amount of continuity of context that we built in, but we moved it from intent to action, right? And that is something that we see the generation really reacting well to and receiving very, very well. And that I would say, at least for the next 3 to 5 years, can be a great template for brands like us to follow on.
I don't know whether the question is how we looking at addressing millennials. As much as today, I think the way I would look at it is that, you know, there are digital natives and the digital migrants, right? And how are we looking at addressing digital natives, people who have grown up in the digital world? So to them, you know, when they even text a message, you know, versus when I'm texting a message, everything is like they've grown up in that world. So, you know, I can just talk about the business that we are in. I can talk oodles and oodles and oodles about Coffee Day, because that's all we did, right? To the millennials, but I'll let that be, because walls have ears and they're just opposite. But I think in the business that we are in today, we are also in the business of smart homes. And it was interesting. We were doing a bit of research to figure out, what's the medium that we need to get to the family, etc. And, you know, digital, of course, and maybe television. And then we found out that today, apart from Alexa, there's nobody else at home through the day. Yeah, everybody is going out to work, and that's also moved into another kind of consumer behavior, which is people are now having cats more as pets more than dogs. You know, because there's nobody at home in the daytime. So what the hell are we doing media planning for the woman who's watching a soap in the afternoon? That's just not true. You know, so I think it's not just the millennials. I think it's the mindset that's changing. It's people. It's the entire context has changed completely. I would look at it that way.
The pace of change in our own professional context, communication context, I mean, it's like change is happening at the speed of a bullet train, and we are only human beings trying to catch up with it. As much as we try, we may not be able to do it. But so busy is our day, I wonder whether can we make an honest confession about, are we spending enough time to just keep abreast of what's happening, and how can we do justice to our roles by learning enough ourselves continuously and making our teams. I mean, each one of you has a team of 5, 10, 20 people. How are you empowering them with the learning and development that is required? So anyone wants to take this question?
There is no shortcut to this, and there's no shortcut to hard work. I think reading and research sounds boring, but unfortunately that's what it is. I think as I read a lot, I like consuming data across all mediums, so it's my personal choice. But I feel if I don't, I will. You consume data not just for your work, but for pleasure, for trivia, maybe to sound smarter than your friends, you know, over beers. But it's really important to stay relevant. And I think as for my team, as far as the research is fun. So you break it down into you're not just reading because you're going to then put out a press note and say X about something. But you're actually reading because it's going to add value to you, and you're also going to stay relevant. So I think that's the message that works for us.
There are only 2 ways to learn, right? Either first principles or you go and look for examples. So I think the right answer is probably in doing both. We have tried to take it a notch higher, particularly given the fact that, I was just talking about this a few minutes back on the table. Unlike e-commerce, which grew in phases over a period of time across the US and then to the East and then in India, mobility is growing at the same time around the world, right? The 4 largest mobility companies in the country were incorporated between 2010 and 11 and 12, in fact, right? In fact, Didi, which is China's largest, was incorporated after Ola was, right? So that's really the pace at which the industry is growing, but all together at the same time. And it was this thought that we really put to use when we set something in motion called the Ola Mobility Institute, which for us is essentially an internal think tank, right? Where we said, is there a way where we can institutionalize learning in our industry so deep that not only are we looking within for data, but also seeing an outside-in view of what the industry needs. So our team has been, the comms team has been very, very instrumental in being able to work with OMI and being able to, I was part of the first report that we ever came out with called the Ease of Moving Index, and was nothing short of a very exhilarating learning experience, right? So I think it works both ways, being able to build things yourself and making it available for the larger industry, as well as looking outside and seeing. I think the nature of publications today, the nature of reporting today, the nature of coverage today that is available on the industry, on the function, on the profession is at an all-time high. So it's about being without an excuse to go and chase for it.
Do you have any advice for millennial CCOs?
Well, like I said that as communication experts, sometimes we just become very siloed about communication. And we say, no, I'm just going to write that content, I'm going to disseminate that content, and I'm going to track that content. And I'm doing a fantastic job of that, no doubt about it. But things have changed, things have completely changed. You become relevant if you talk business, no matter which business category we are in. I mean, whether it's automotive, whether it's real estate, whether it's energy, whether it's F&B, the minute you start talking business, the minute you start talking, why am I writing or why am I communicating? To whom am I communicating? To what benefit? At the end of the day, before a person comes to buy a product, guess what? The person is doing research on LinkedIn, right? So it's our business as communication experts to know everything about that person, to know about the customer, to understand their motives, their triggers, their drivers, and to understand what is my business goal. Because if you don't know that, trust me, you're just writing a narrative just for the sake of storytelling. It's not going to really make an impact into the bottom line of the company. And today, I think across categories, everybody is talking. There is a sense of business business urgency. There's a sense of growth. There's a sense of market share. Everybody is talking that language. And as communication experts, I keep telling my team that we have the power of knowledge because we are reading. We are the source of knowledge for the company. And if we don't read ourselves, and if we are not, guiding my business partner saying, hey, do you know, Siemens has just done this, and imagine the value that you're going to bring to that person. Yeah. So that's what I keep telling myself as a stuck record, no matter which business that I am in.